Hi everyone, in this video we will create a boilerplate project for Angular 18 and the latest version of Firebase, showcasing the best practices when it comes to integrating Firebase into an Angular project. This codebase will be published in a GitHub repo, so feel free to copy this code to use it into your own projects, or if you're planning to migrate into Angular 18. So at this point, the project is empty, so we're going to clone it into our project and then create the Angular app inside of it. Make sure you have your Angular CLI at the latest version. It should be at 18. You can check it by running the command ng version. Then simply run the command ng new, the name of your project, and the directory. We will be using the current directory because we don't want the command to create another directory. Once your application is installed, we can add the Firebase package using the Angular schematics ng add angular/fire. This will actually install the necessary dependencies and also make changes into your app config file to write down the necessary imports to get your Firebase configured. This is a very important step, and it is important to have a empty project to do this correctly, because if you run this command into an existing project, depending on how complicated the file or your app-config file is, it might not work correctly. So in my experience, when the project is brand new, the ng add angular/fire works best. All right, as you proceed, the tool will ask you a few questions about what features from Firebase you want to use. In this case, we will be using authentication for sure. We will be also using Firestore. We will be using cloud functions and cloud storage. All right, next step is to choose your account and then select your project, Firebase project. In this case, I've already created a project for this video. I'm not gonna cover the process of creating a Firebase project. That is really all right. Let's jump to our package.json file. You can see that our Angular Fire package is installed and ready to roll. Let's have a look now to our app config file. This is where Angular, the new Angular configuration goes. This long line, number 13, has been added by the ng add tool. Let me format it real quick. And as you can see now, apart from the first two, from line 15, we start by initializing the Firebase app. Then we provide an instance of the authentication feature, an instance for Firestore, functions, and storage. What this does is provide your application with a singleton for each of these features. So whenever a component asks for an injection of one of these classes, you will always get one instance, the instance that has been created at the bootstrap of your app. So what we are going to do next is use those injections in order to build a bridge between your application and the Firestore services. All right, before we go any further, we need to provide initialize app with this configuration object. This is available in your Firebase project. You can copy those values from there and inject it into your initialize app. All right, once we have done that, we can start creating our services, starting with Firestore service. This is where your app will go to connect with your Firestore database. Best practice is to isolate all the logic that requires talking to your Firestore in this file. You don't want to inject this Firestore object into your components. If you do, that will work, but this is considered a bad practice as it violates the principle of separation of concern. You should have everything that talks to Firebase, Firestore, or whatever, in a separate service. So this is a Firestore service. We inject this Firestore class. Later on, we will create some basic functions to communicate with the Firestore database. For now, let's create the other services. FireAuth is coming next. Again, you should not inject this auth class anywhere else in your application. It should be dedicated, separated in this service. Again, we will create basic functions to communicate with the authentication feature later on. This auth class is provided from the app config file, just like the other services. All right, let's have a look now at some basic functions we can do with this auth feature. So we can listen to the state change, sign in, sign up, sign out, send password, reset email. These are functions that we will implement later on. For now, let's jump into the Fire storage service. Same thing, we inject a storage instance from that class that we have instantiated from the app config file, just like the other services. And from there, we will use some basic functions such as upload the file or download the file, etc. Last service is the functions. So basically, we will create another service that will be responsible for talking to our cloud functions if we need that. I don't know if we are going to use the functions in this in the next project, because this video is just about the boilerplate. But there will be a following video where we will be using this code base. So Fire functions, same principle. We inject the functions class, and we will see later on how to use the features required to communicate with the cloud functions. All right, let's jump back to the Firestore service. There are three families of functions we could take advantage of. Ones that require talking to the document, collections, or group of collections. In terms of single documents, you might want to create a document with a specific ID. For example, you want to create a user and you want to use their email as an ID to prevent a duplicate. This is the way to go. So you create a document and provide the exact path. Or you want to add the document to a collection. You don't care about the ID of that document. You just want to add a document inside a collection. That means that you provide a collection path to which you want to add a document. Then you might want to get a document given a document path. You want to probably also update a document and finally delete a document. Those are all private functions. That means that you can only use them from within the Firestore service, which means that the knowledge of where your documents live is hosted in this Firestore service, which act as an API between your component and your database. Your component should not know how to communicate with your database. Only these services should know how to do so. Because if tomorrow you want to update to a newer version of Firestore, or you want to change completely your data source, your application should continue working provided that you change these main functions. So that basically makes it easier as your app progresses into the future to maintain it. So now let's create the code. Let's add the code for creating a document. So as you can see, we are using this function doc, which we import separately. And we give it as a first argument the instance of Firestore and the doc, the path of the doc. This gives us a reference to that doc, which is not created yet, but then we can create that document using another function called setDoc. Previously, in older versions of Angular Fire, you would have these functions attached to Firestore instance. That means that all the functions, all the features of Firestore are already imported and ready to use. In this case, you only import the functions that are needed. That means that in your bundle size will be smaller. will contain only the functions or only the code required for the functions or the features that you use. All right, let's define now the add document function. We will do it in a couple of steps. First is to make a reference to a collection this time because we want to add a document into a collection. Then we use the function add doc, which will actually create the document into that collection. We might want to return the ID of the document that has been created if we want to update it for later on in our application. All right, now let's jump to the get document function. Again, we will do it in a couple of steps. First, we get a reference to the document, and then we use the function get doc from server to fetch that document. Now, we check if the document exists. If it does exist, we return it as T, which is a generic type that allows us to take advantage of typing. And if it doesn't exist, we return null. Same thing for update doc. In this case, we have a couple of functions we can use. The first one is set doc with an additional parameter called merge true and update doc. The difference between the two is that update doc will throw an error if it doesn't find a document at the given path, where set doc will create a new document if no documents has been found at that location. Depending on your use cases, you might want to use one or the other. In our case, and for the sake of this example, we will keep the update doc function. Now let's move to delete document. Same thing again, reference, then call delete doc to actually delete the document. All right, at this point, we have already used all the functions that we've imported from Firestore. Obviously, there are many other functions that you can use, but the main point here in this new version of Firebase is that it is treeshakable, meaning that your bundle size will only contain the methods that you use in your project. All right, let's move now to FireAuth service. In this service, we will be using few features. The first one is to listen to the auth state, because when your application will bootstrap, the first thing this service will do is try to figure out if there is an active session in your browser, to which case it will trigger an event to which you need to listen if you want to log in the user as soon as they open your web page. Second one is to sign in with an email and password, or you want to sign up a new user to your application, sign out, or send a password reset email. Those are the functions that we will cover in this tutorial, but there are many other things you might want to do with FireAuth. All right, first thing we will need to do is basically listen to that auth state. It's a private function that we will be calling from the constructor, meaning that as soon as an instance of auth service is created, we will be listening to the auth state. The other functions are public. Those are functions that you will be calling from your component. All right, now, in order to listen to your auth state, you use this function provided by Angular Fire /auth, which will give us a observable to which we can subscribe. Basically, when the auth state changes, it triggers an event that uses either a user or null if the user has logged out. And depending on the architecture of your application, you might do stuff from there, depending on what kind of reactivity you wanna be using. Next is create a user or sign up a user. In this case, we will be using a email password method. You can log or create users with different methods. It could be from Apple ID, Google ID, or many other solutions. In this case, we keep it simple. We use email password. Once your user has typed in an email and password, you can call this create user with email and password function, provided again with Angular Fire auth. Once that's done, you can send them an email to let them confirm their email address. Next is sign in with an email and password. This is very similar to the previous one, except it uses a different function. That function, when logging is successful, will trigger the auth state from where you can actually react and do something. All right. Finally, you want to sign out at some point. If the user wants to log out, you can provide them with a function that at the end we'll call this function here. Again, for your users, if they forgot at some point their password, you can provide them with the functionality to receive an email to reset their password. So that's all for this Fire Auth. We won't go into further details. I think you've got the point. Next, we will see how to use Fire storage and cloud functions. Here we are in the Fire function service that we have created earlier. We will need only one function that will actually make the call to any cloud function that we might have. And so basically that uses the HTTP callable. That means that on Firebase functions, we will be using on-call functions and not request functions. On-call functions are easier to use in a context of a Firebase SDK. But if you need functions that will be called in different contexts, say, for example, from your another server or another application, then you might want to create on-request functions, to which case you will need to use them or call them using other methods such as fetch or request or Axios or any other HTTP client. Now, if we want to use a cloud function that's called send email, we just need to call our private function with the function name and the payload as a second argument and then wait for a response. As you can see, you can do it in a couple of lines where on request function would require much more complications. All right, let's now move to the last piece, which is the Fire storage. In this file here, in this Firestore service, we will only define one function for now, which is upload a file. Basically, from your component, if you want to add a file to your bucket, to your storage bucket, you only need to give it a file. You can actually use blob or base64 as a content. In this case, we use a file as a type. Then we give it a path, and then we would use upload bytes. This function is obviously provided by Angular Fire storage that we import at the top of this service. And there you have it, your survival kit for working with the Firebase and Angular 18. If you want to start developing your own app, or if you want to migrate to the latest version of Firebase. This is just the first step. We will be creating another video using this code base in order to work with all the intricacies of Firebase tools. So make sure you subscribe to get notified when that video comes out. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as this is my very first videos. It will be very helpful to know if this kind of content is actually needed or appreciated. Until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.